Hey y'all, and welcome back to my channel. I have had lots of requests for a wood grain tumbler, and I thought I would just make it a little bit of a challenge and go with a peekaboo. This design was so much fun and it turned out beautiful, so I'm excited to show you how I made it. So to start, we are using a 32 plumb from the Steel Magnolia. And for a glitter application, we are using the new COLORFLEX glitter glue from ARTISTRY. It is a super awesome glue. It is a little bit thicker and it's super tacky, so it goes on really well, and your glitter, especially the chunkies or the chunky mix, sticks to it, and you can still have time to press it down to get a really nice smooth epoxy application. The glitter we are using is Wedding Day from PDB Creative Studio. I am super excited about this because it was just released and it is a custom mixed by myself and my daughter. This is a new release, so I will list you some alternatives below in the event that it is out of stock, but make sure that you are following PDB Creative Studios group so you can be notified whenever they have restocks and get your hands on some of this. I allowed the glue to dry for about 2 hours, sealed it with Rust-Oleum matte, and then went in with one coat of Artistry's 1-to-1 fast set, and all I had to do was sand down my top and bottom rim, and I was ready to add my decal. I will of course list this file below for y'all, and once my tumbler was ready for my stencil, I measured around and the height of the tumbler to make sure that I would get this perfectly sized. I made it the exact width so my design would be seamless and just slightly taller than my tumbler, so it would go over the edge just a bit and I can trim that off. I'd rather it be a little excessive on the top and bottom than have not enough. I have roughly a 12 by 12 sheet of transfer tape, and I am basically applying it to my stencil as I would applying a wrap around my tumbler. I don't want any bubbles or ridges or anything in this because that will affect the way that this goes on the tumbler. And I did leave a little slither of that backing on there just because I had intended on applying this as I would like a vinyl wrap to my tumbler, and that was an epic fail. So I basically just rolled the backing off, and when rolling your vinyl off instead of just pulling it straight up, it really helps when you're applying that pressure to push your design down onto that transfer tape and help it not lift. So you saw me just sort of throw the water down on my table. I was super frustrated by this point because I did fail trying to wrap it around. But we're going to try out the same method that we used on our honeycomb tumbler. So I sprayed some Dawn Power Wash on here. You see my design is still attached to my transfer tape, and I really saturated the tumbler with water so that I can freely move this around and line it up perfectly on the back. There was a lot of detail on this, a lot of fine lines. So getting that perfectly lined up was super important to me. And this was my hack, I guess you could say, on getting that done. And if it takes you a few tries this way, that is totally fine. It took me quite a while to get this lined up perfectly, but I just made sure that I was constantly adding a little bit of water so my decal would not stick to my tumbler anywhere while I was trying to line it up. Once I had it lined up perfectly, I made sure that the little area where my decal was lined up was pressed down first so that that would adhere and wouldn't move around. And then I took a rag and tried to push out any water that I possibly could out from under the decal. I grabbed my heat gun and turned it on low and very carefully just went back and forth along that seam to get the water to dry up underneath and to get the stencil to adhere to my tumbler. Once I had made sure that it was starting to stick, then I gradually worked my way all the way around the cup by lifting up that transfer tape, pressing out the water, and pressing my decal down as I was using my heat gun around the cup. This was not the easiest thing in the world, I will say that, but it was the easiest way for me to get this really detailed design around my tumbler without any error. Once I made it halfway around, I trimmed off the excess transfer tape just so it wouldn't be in my way, pressed out any water that was underneath, and then went back in with my heat gun and worked the opposite way from the other side of the seam. Once I had that transfer tape all the way off, I went back in with my heat gun. You can see I'm not close to my tumbler at all. It is on low and low heat, and just press down any of the vinyl, use my hand to kind of wipe off any of the excess water that was still there and any water that was underneath my vinyl. I did wash this off with water and dry with a terry cloth just to get any soap residue off, and trimmed off the excess vinyl that was hanging over the bottom. And then I sprayed it with Rust-Oleum matte white. Just one good coat, it doesn't have to be super dark. And now we are going in with our wood grain. I'm just using a cheap coarse bristle brush that I got from the paint section at Walmart. You can get these a lot of different places, and I believe the craft store even has them. But I am not the best in the world at doing wood grains. I have seen some very talented people. They can even add knots and texture in by using a really nice brush. But for me, I'm not the best in the world, so I like using something that has texture to it and a little coarse so that it adds in the sort of like wood grain lines for me. I'm using Tim Holtz Teakwood alcohol ink. This is the darkest I could find. I feel like the really dark looks amazing under epoxy, so I'm always using the Teakwood. And I just apply little streaks of the alcohol ink and then take my brush in and pretty much go in the same direction. You don't want to go crazy. Make sure you stay vertical. That way your lines look like a wood grain. And don't put too much on your tumbler at one time, because you really don't want it to start to run like you saw there. I caught it before it started going around the tumbler. But if it runs around and it dries, then you'll sort of be able to see, or it'll take a good bit of effort to try to get that little streak to blend into the rest of your wood grain. And since this is the first wood grain we have done on the channel, I'm just gonna let this play through for y'all so you can see my entire process. I allowed this to dry for about 2 hours. You may be able to go in sooner, but after all of this effort I have put into this tumbler, I did not want to mess it up or take that risk. So I allowed it to dry for 2 hours. Normally I would have went in with a coat of Rust-Oleum matte clear, but I only had gloss on hand, and for some reason I have found in the past that when using a gloss sealer on top of a wood grain, it sort of makes little splotches in it and messes up the design, I guess you can say. I don't really know why. It probably is just personal error. But if you happen to have a Rust-Oleum matte clear spray paint on hand, then take that and hold your can way back to where your tumbler is basically getting a very light dusting. Do that a couple of rounds and that will be just enough to seal in your wood grain design without damaging it or putting little splotches on it. I removed all of the stencil vinyl, and normally I wouldn't show most of this, but it was just so satisfying to see that beautiful glitter come through the wood grain. Once I had all of my stencil removed, I went in with 2 final coats of Artistry's 1:1 ratio fast set, and I'm telling y'all, this epoxy continues to surprise me or amaze me, because not only does it dry within an hour to the touch, and then by the end of the day, even with 2 top coats, I'm able to photograph and video my tumblers. But I have always had issues with my epoxy repelling from alcohol inks in the past, or tumblers that have different textures on them, and this did not. It went on like perfection. It didn't repel around the top and bottom rims or anywhere in between. It is a thick viscosity epoxy, and it also dries super fast, so I think just those 2 in combination really help speeds up the process and prevent any repelling. And here's the final result. Y'all, I am so obsessed. I absolutely love this. The shine, the darkness of the wood grain, the glitter that I mixed myself with my daughter shining through. It's just, to me, it's perfect. And although this one will be listed for sale in my shop very soon, I'm gonna definitely have to make one similar for myself. I hope that you all enjoyed this tutorial. We are on Instagram as well, and I post short little tutorials in the Reels. Join our Facebook group for lots of fun and giveaways. I also love seeing all of your beautiful creations. And don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Hit the little bell in the corner to be notified anytime a new tutorial drops. Thank you all so much, and we'll see you next time.